All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today for the second food and beverage webinar that we're putting on. We're doing this in conjunction with the food and beverage team at Global Victoria in Melbourne. I'm Brian Carnahan. I'm the Senior Trade Director. I'm based in San Francisco. We have a series of offices across the U.S. to help support companies entering the market. So we appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully many of you saw the event last weekend, and we're going to kind of build upon that. Just for your information, this is being recorded for future distribution, and we will make it available at a future date. So again, thank you for participating, and I'd like to turn it over. We've done a lot of work with Patricia Pfeiffer from Quisauted and also Janice Grover from Grover Global. They put together this presentation for everybody. So I'd like to turn it over to Patricia to proceed with the presentation. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Brian, and thanks to the entire Global Victoria team for giving us the opportunity to share very broadly with you the state of the North American food and beverage industry. This presentation, in part, is the culmination of extensive market research that Global Victoria requested, and I, along with my colleagues Janice Grover of Grover Global Food Marketing and Brian Todd of Brian Todd Associates. I'm sorry, would you go back to that first slide, please? Thank you. Developed and delivered an in-depth report analyzing categories within the food and beverage industry. Last week, as Brian mentioned, Janice and Brian, along with Andy Harvell and Lauren Handel, presented information pertaining to the laws and regulations, distribution, and market sizing, and I hope you were able to view that program. It was fantastic and just chock full of important information. Today we're speaking about marketing strategy, market segments, branding, advertising, and of course, increased use of technology in food retail. But first, a very high level, quick view. The North American food and beverage market is undergoing dynamic change. Aging populations, political uncertainty, social changes, technology advances are only a few of the factors rapidly transforming the market and consumption behaviors. The market shifts are creating tremendous opportunities for organizations to introduce new products, enter new markets, employ new technologies, to manage sales, distribution, and consumer purchase, and even reimagine brand marketing and communication strategies to attract and engage emerging consumers and create new experiences for their loyal customers. So this panel will speak today to some of these shifts and give you guidance to the possibilities of bringing products to this market. So next slide, please. So the market for the consumer food, which is grocery, food service, food and beverage stores, in-home and home away in the U.S. was $1.86 trillion in 2020, nearly 30% of the total $6.215 trillion spent on all of retail. Contributing to the food produced domestically, imported foods make up an important portion of the U.S. food supply. Imports account for 15% of the overall food supply for more than 125,000 facilities in over 200 countries. Next slide, please. So to speak more about food marketing in North America, we convened a panel for you, each with unique experiences to share more about food marketing, providing an overview of data, strategies, and tactics that might be useful to you as you consider a move to bring your products and services here. As a brief introduction, the presenters are Luke Lucas of Foddy's Food, me, Patricia Pfeiffer of Quisauted, John Sadowski of Metro Valley Advertising, and Rick Chrisberg of the A-Team. Next slide, please. So the agenda for the presentation is fellow Australian Luke Lucas shares his experience with moving his business to America and taking his products to market, and he'll share the do's and don'ts of launching products here. I'll speak to trends transforming the food and beverage consumption in America. John Sadowski will give an overview of the digital and mobile advertising. Rick Chrisberg speaks to brand strategies to grow business, and together John and Rick will present a case study and speak of their collaborative effort in developing a branding and messaging campaign that resulted in growth that placed their product at the top of its category. Next slide, please. So first up is Luke Lucas. He's a managing director of Fadi's Food, who will share his U.S. business experience. Take it, Luke.
Well, thank you, Patricia. I appreciate that. And thank you, everyone, for signing on and giving up your Wednesday morning. I'm giving a brief overview of our experience coming into the United States. I know the guys later are going to be talking about some high-level issues that you need to be aware of, marketing trends, sizes, and some of the numbers are probably going to blow your mind if you're not familiar with them, because it really is quite significantly larger than what we have back in Australia. But we figured that giving a practical example of how we went about doing it would probably be some additional benefit. So very brief background. I don't want to spend too much time about myself and my business, because the purpose of today is more to give you some tips, but it is important in terms of how we've done it and why we've done it to go over what we've done. So very quickly, my bio is just up there. I won't talk about it. If we can move on to the next slide, I'll start talking about our business. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but very briefly, my partner and I got together about 7 years ago. I have irritable bowel syndrome. My partner, Chrissy, has fructose malabsorption. We realized that there wasn't a lot of food offerings being provided for people like us, and we decided to get together. My background was in finance, as the previous slide mentioned. Chrissy was in food, loved food, but was in healthcare, and we thought we'd come together as a team. If we move on to the next slide, then we'll go on to what the brand is, and that's Fadi's, and it's a low FODMAP food brand. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. For those that are not, it's a diet that actually was originated and created in Melbourne through Monash University, and it's suitable for people with various gastrointestinal disorders like irritable bowel syndrome, fructose malabsorption, as the number of ingredients that we can't consume. As a lot of you in the industry will know, onion and garlic is pretty prevalent. Over here in the States, high fructose corn syrup. So it makes eating out in either a restaurant or packaged form very difficult. If we can move on to the next slide, we'll go through the benefits of the product. And the reason I'm saying this is not to promote ourselves. This is kind of the start of the talk, I suppose, is that you need a reason for being here. America is huge. It is really huge. And everyone says that, but it really is in practice. And what that means in practice is that chances are your product is available here. Now, the reason we came is because we have a very clearly defined value proposition. We know who we are as a business. We know who our consumers are as consumers, and we know what our product does. And that gives us the ability to get into the market and sell it at a specific target, at a specific price point, because we are very clear about that. And you need to be very clear on what your value proposition is. Just being another brand of product isn't going to cut it over here, because there is just so much. There are so many options, so many choices that you need to be crystal clear. That doesn't mean it can't be done, obviously, and being the best product out there is a legitimate value proposition, but you need to be crystal clear on what your benefit to the consumer is here in the United States. So that's the main reason I wanted to bring all this stuff up, is because it's really, really crucial as a starting point on which you can build. So on to the next slide, if we can, please. So we have a launch range. We actually have a much, much bigger range based in Australia. We have a frozen line, which is actually a larger part of our business across desserts, frozen meals, and dumplings. But we also have an ambient line of product. And we made the decision, for reasons I'll discuss, to launch with these ambient products as opposed to the frozen range. Most of you will be aware of the complexities of dealing frozen, particularly when it comes to shipping. And so we made the decision that we would launch with products that were easy to produce, easy to handle, easy to fulfill, easy to warehouse. And that's where we came up with these 9 SKUs. So a range of 5 spice mixes, 3 baking mixes, and a coating mix. All of them are gluten-free. All of them are low FODMAP, so they have no onion, no garlic. All of these products are vegan as well. Most of the spices are low in sodium. So we tick off a lot of the boxes that, as I mentioned previously, we know add value to our consumer here in the United States. So we call it out on our packaging. We got a lot of the packaging redesigned for American purposes. Obviously, you'll need to get FDA approved labels and nutrition facts panels and that kind of thing. But you need to be crystal clear on what you're going to launch with. If you've only got one product, well, that makes it easy, or a handful of products, that makes it easy. But you need to be really crystal clear on what you're going to launch with and try and make it as simple as possible, because if you don't, the costs are going to add up pretty quickly, particularly depending on how you choose to distribute the range, which leads into my next slide. which is how we did it. So we made the decision to go e-commerce via Amazon and our own e-commerce website. It's tough to give generic advice because obviously each of you signing in have businesses at different levels, different sizes, different capabilities. For some of you, going direct through retail is going to be a no-brainer and you can nail that from the start. Others may have no interest in that and may have some kind of capability already built into their website, their online platform. So I'm just trying to give as broad generic advice as I possibly can, but do bear with me if it may not apply to you. So onto Amazon. If you're retailing online in the United States, you have to be on Amazon. It's pretty much impossible to function unless you're a superstar brand without being on Amazon. They control the market, they control consumer spending here in the United States, and even now offline with their purchase of Whole Foods and various other conditions, various other purchases. They are difficult to work with, or they can be difficult to work with. So you need to be familiar with their service offering and their costs. So I mentioned that they take their pound of flesh. They do that in terms of fulfillment fees, in terms of logistics, in terms of warehouses. I've mentioned that you need to choose a fulfillment method, and that's very important because you can fulfill it yourself and order, or you can have Amazon fulfill it for you. Both approaches have different sets of complexities, different benefits, different costs that you will need to weigh up and figure out what works best for your business. In Australia, Amazon's obviously been there for a couple of years, I think now. They only offer what's called FBM, fulfilled by merchant. My understanding is, so if you're on Amazon, you have to basically fulfill the order yourself. But in the United States, you can ask them to do it for you. They have issues with their algorithm, their almighty algorithm that we have run across ourselves. So the first 90 days, you're pretty much invisible to anyone because you're an unknown quantity and their brand reputation is more important than some random startup that's moved over from Australia. And that then leads into the issue of how do you stand out, which is again why it's so important to have a clear value proposition, but also a marketing budget, because a lot of the initial orders you're going to get are based on the ads that you put up, and those ads that you put up are going to then feed into your organic rankings and how your product pops up on search when people are just searching generic search terms like spice mix or baking mix or whatever your generic term for your product will be. So it's huge. There's a big opportunity, but it can be expensive on Amazon, and there's a lot of complexities that you need to be familiar with. The other alternative on the next slide that I mentioned is e-commerce, your own personal e-commerce. And we were fortunate that we already had an e-commerce offering in Australia, and about 10% of our traffic was already coming from the United States. So our main issue was simply splitting up the online shop to having an Australian version and a United States version. So we just duplicated our existing offering. We cut out 90% of the service offering, which was Australian only, and just rolled with these 9 SKUs that we have here. But again, as I've mentioned, you've got similar issues in terms of how you're going to fulfill, and the larger issue of how you're going to drive traffic. Again, as I said, there is a huge amount of competition here. There's loads of choices, loads of options. What are you going to do to drive traffic to your website? What kind of advertising strategy and budget are you going to put towards this to get people to come to you directly? Amazon obviously gets people naturally coming there to shop. You don't have that luxury unless you're already getting traffic from the United States. And this is, again, assuming you're going direct to consumer. How are you going to be doing that? I've mentioned complexity of shipping because in my experience at least, shipping is much more straightforward in Australia. And again, this is direct to consumer. If you're not going direct to consumer, this probably won't apply to you. But in Australia, there just aren't that many options. You've got some couriers, you've got Australia Post, and that's about the extent of it. Here, trying to set up a shipping solution on an e-commerce website, and even on Amazon, because you have to do it yourself too, at least the options. There are so many different providers and there are so many different options. There's 1 day, overnight, 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, 4 day, economy, priority, first, the USPS, which is the standard postal service, UPS, FedEx. There are so many different options. They have zones that dictate where it goes to. There is quite a bit of complexity that will get a bit to get your head around as far as pricing goes and getting that all done right. It can be done, obviously, but it's just something to be aware of. So if we jump into the next slide, I want to get straight into the key learnings. So I've got 4 key learnings because at the end of the day, that's why I'm here. It's to give learnings that I've had from being here. I moved here in August. So it's been a bit over 6 months now. And the purpose of this is to really give you guys some practical tips that I think will help. So the first key learning is having boots on the ground. It's having a presence here. It's almost impossible. Oh, no, it's not almost impossible, but it's much, much more difficult to get anything done if you're not going to be here. there's basic things like time zone and time differences. And while it's not that bad, it does actually make a difference, because by the time people get messages, get emails, work on it, they don't respond till the next day. It really does slow the process down. And in addition, it's good to be here to just get a feel of trends, walking through the supermarkets yourselves, or someone as a representative. You can stay on top of things. One little anecdote I'll mention is that I've been to a couple of the food shows here. Pretty much everyone I speak to who's interested in distributing the product says, "Where are you based?" And then when I say I'm here in Dallas, Texas, those who don't know, my accent hasn't changed yet, but I'm in Dallas. They then ask, "Well, are you staying? Are you going to be staying here long term?" And that's always the second question I get asked. Everyone's always wants to know if I'm going to be here and if a representative is going to be here as a point of contact. So I really can't stress this enough. But then the question becomes, who are you going to send over? Are you going to be sending over a salesperson or a quality control person? And are they going to be a long-term or a short-term thing? Now, the quality control person is potentially going to be very busy if you're manufacturing here through a co-packer, maybe not so much if you're exporting yourself. Salesperson benefit potentially with the EMDG, the Export Market Development Grant, but then they've got to make sure they're earning their weight over here, obviously. Then the practical issue at the moment is getting over here from a customs and immigration perspective. So I had quite a few challenges, a lot of which were as a result of COVID, a lot of which were as a result of some changes that were brought in under former President Trump. So it is a challenge getting a visa at the moment. Waiting times are very long. Getting a longer term visa is very challenging. So it's something that you're going to have to be prepared to deal with. There are big delays. So it's just something to keep in mind if you are going to be sending someone over. Next slide, please. The next key learning was manufacturing. We had the idea that we would be exporting from Australia early last year. We made the decision. We said, yep, we're going to start doing this. We're going to manufacture in our facility in Melbourne, and we're going to export everything over to the United States. About 2 months after we'd made that decision, we reversed course and said, no, that's absolutely not going to happen, and I'm going to need to come over here and get manufacturing set up over in the United States. There is no right or wrong answer here. There's benefits and disadvantages and drawbacks for either approach. I'm not going to go through line by line. I know this recording will be made available, but broadly speaking, I've listed what they are, and it's something that you're going to need to be aware of. We made the decision to manufacture over here for a couple of reasons. The first is cost. We are set up for manufacturing in Australia, but the sheer size of the United States, which the guys are going to talk about later, meant that the investment that we would have had to put into the factory to build up our capacity, not to mention the additional labor we would require to run that CapEx spend, it just made it unrealistic. For that kind of money, we could be spending more on marketing here, just getting the product over here and just accelerating the entire process. For those of you who already have manufacturing capability, that may not apply. You may have the slack, you may have the capacity to expand it dramatically, and that may be great. The drawback you're going to have is that, as anyone who's in shipping at the moment will be aware, shipping is an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute disaster at the moment with everything that's going on. And from what I've seen, that's not going to be improving anytime soon. So it's super expensive. It's very unreliable. The last thing you're going to want to do is get product into a retailer or a stockist or a distributor only to not be able to fulfill the orders because you just can't get product over here. So there's drawbacks for both approaches. We made the decision to come over here mainly for that reason, but also practically speaking, we get to claim that it's made in the United States. You do get less scrutiny from the FDA, which is just a little benefit. So one of the learnings, actually, this was with Janice that I think Brian mentioned previously through Grover Global, anything that comes into the United States from overseas is going to be inspected with a fine-tooth comb. That won't be as much of an issue for product made in the United States. You can get away with a bit over here when you're manufacturing here. Not that I advocate that and not that we're doing it ourselves, but the reality is that the scrutiny is just not as much. So if there are little issues on your packaging, for example, you're not going to face the prospect of having pallets or containers turned away at the port if it's manufactured here. So I'll leave it there. Anyone who wants to go through that more, by all means do so on your own time. If we can jump onto the next page, please, the next slide. My second last key learning is distribution. I've split it out across retail and online. Again, if online direct to consumer doesn't apply to you, you can safely ignore that. But very quickly, you've got two approaches with Amazon: fulfilled by Amazon FBA, fulfilled by merchant FBM. Amazon, again, takes care of it for you. FBM, you do it yourself. There are benefits to doing FBM where you do it yourself, because you can also use a fulfillment center to potentially drop ship into retailers and stockists around the country. And that's what we do. So we have a central fulfillment center in North Carolina that holds all of our product. All of our e-commerce and Amazon orders are delivered out of there. But if a small retailer somewhere in regional America, or even in a larger city that doesn't deal with a distributor, wants to place a small order, we can just fulfill directly out of that warehouse and facility, which is a little benefit for us. On the retail side, brokers are critical. They navigate the entire world for you. They will charge you for that, either in the form of a retainer or a commission or both. Brokers don't really exist in Australia. You generally just have distributors and retailers. Brokers kind of are an intermediary between you as the producer and them as the distributor and retailer, but you do need to deal with them. And finally, cost is the main thing. It's expensive. It's very expensive. You'd be familiar with Coles and Woolies if you've dealt with them. You've got slotting fees, potentially free fills where you have to give free product, and just the sheer volume of product because of the size. It will blow your mind how much product you actually need. And that's because everything is multiplied here. You need marketing support to either stand out on Amazon or on Google Ads, or in terms of those slotting fees, free fills, end caps, whatever it is. And there's online fulfillment and sales fees as well. So this is probably the main key learning, and I've left it for last. It's expensive. You need to have money behind you to do the run, to get the product in the store, to do the advertising. You really need to be prepared to put some money behind it. Otherwise, people just won't take you seriously. So just be prepared that it's gonna cost a bit of money. And that's it. So with me finished, I'll hand back to Patricia and she'll take it from there.
Thanks, Luke. That's fantastic information. I appreciate that, as I'm sure everyone else did. It's interesting. Your experience is very similar to what we'll be speaking about through the rest of the presentation. So it was a great setup here. My name is Patricia Pfeiffer. I am principal at market research firm Quicited. We produce foundational information, data, insights used by organizations to make strategic business decisions. We accomplish this through a myriad methodologies such as survey instruments, product testing, interviews, analyses of competitors and overall markets. We work with both domestic and global organizations. And it was because of our research expertise that we were brought in to assist with the research for Global Victoria. So let's get to some of those research findings. Next slide, please. So Luke mentioned it several times, I believe, but the sheer number of people and product in America creates numerous opportunities and competition in the food and beverage industry. As he also mentioned, identifying and understanding both those commercial and consumer segments is absolutely imperative. Producers must develop market strategies to attract product representatives, importers, agents, distributors, and the retailers. And increasingly, we're finding this with our business. Retailers are requiring producers and suppliers to provide consumer attitude and behavior trends, identify emerging segments, relate competitor actions, and provide information on product sales and trends. They consider producers their partners and expect you as a partner to drive traffic and revenue their way. So strategies must outmaneuver your competitors. As Luke said, those slotting fees are expensive, and aligning the product and the organizational values with a consumer lifestyle, customer-centric companies can succeed with sharp focus on segments, engagement, innovative products, packaging, and communications. I think you're going a little too fast. Okay, just keep it up. One more back, please. Yes, perfect. So your strategies must include a digital presence. Again, he mentioned that we're moving from e-commerce to more mobile commerce or m-commerce. Being able to view and purchase anything on any device mobile, from a watch to a phone to all devices. So it's more of a mobile commerce than just a simple e-commerce. We're talking about engagement and experience, in-person events and case studies. So for that digital presence, and Luke mentioned this also, that market fragmentation, your digital strategy is imperative to revenue generating and your brand success. A successful strategy will generate data also for key performance indicators and benchmarking. Nope, back again. I'll let you know. It enables your customer feedback on product performance and digital experience. It provides data to inform management, marketing, and sales and business decisions. Also, you'll need that sales data and other types of data as a proof of concept to relate to investors, retail buyers, and other channel partners. Stay right there, please. Social media, over half of consumers use social media to research products and services. Social has evolved as a peer influence to purchase decisions, with an estimated 71% of consumers likely to purchase as a result of social media recommendations. And then we have that experiential effect. Consumers want a reason to purchase your product. They want to know that you care about them. The cultural variety, busy schedules, interest in physical activity, health and wellness, and new technology platforms are influencing consumer purchase decisions and buying behaviors. The synergy of these factors give rise to a new personal and family experiences that are putting demand on the channel players and partners to engage, keep pace, and pivot fast to support and sustain the ever-moving consumer life pace. Consumers are also interested in the impact the company and product have on the environment. Consumers are seeking food with purpose, health, and environmental benefits. In an effort at responding to these demands, some food entrepreneurs employ tactics that include participating in attending events, festivals, and other similar gatherings where their target segments will be attending. That face-to-face or view-to-view, either real-time or teleconference. Entrepreneurs connect with the buyers, consumers, to share the experience, support the cause, and give back to the community. And then just that last one, the case studies, are useful in proving a proof of concept or market acceptance within a community. A viewer at last week's presentation asked whether doing business with a retailer in another country would be useful information to share with a channel partner here. My colleague Janice Grover suggested a case study could be useful, especially if the importer, distributor, or buyer served a particular segment of the market. Next slide, please. So currently there are distinct generation segments in North America, each exhibiting different purchase behaviors, expectation, and personal or household food expenditures. So while the boomer generation had been America's largest generation, Gen Z has taken the spot as its largest cohort. Gen Y is only 3 million less. You can see the numbers there in millions. So while Gen Z, which is younger than 25 years, is not yet in the world of full-time employment, they report purchase power of about $600 billion, with 76% of that spent on specialty foods. They have never known life without digital connection. They use devices to make shopping lists, purchase, and share their experience about the products they use. And even with digital and mobile access, though, they do enjoy shopping experience and report making more than 4 trips a month to a food store. Now, if you were present at last week's presentation, you heard that in the US, food is distributed in many retail formats, from small convenience stores to specialty stores to farmers markets, traditional and big box retail. So this is not to say that this segment enjoys shopping only in the traditional retail store. So do know the segment you're serving and where they like to shop. The millennials, 25 to 36 years old, have purchasing power totaling $323 billion, with 82% of that on specialty foods. They shop for deals and specials. They're rendering them brand agnostic. This cohort with children spend about $100 more per month than those without children. And then on average, Gen Z has purchasing power of $357 billion per year, with about 70% of it on specialty foods. They're spending mostly on dairy products, fresh and processed foods. Gen Z is known to use digital technology and devices to redeem coupons, and they cite to try new grocery items and prepare new food. So if your product is one that you like to put menus on the back, you might want to consider that as a segment. Then we have boomers, the 55 to 64-year-olds have a collective purchase power of approximately 548 billion, of which 50% is spent on specialty foods. Next slide, please. So this is overwhelming. I understand that, but it's a marketing strategy grid. It's used to align the organization's overall strategy and messaging with particular audience segments. The grid is populated with information necessary to guide your team and to stay focused to ensure throughout the channel of distribution, your company is relaying a consistent message via content and visual. This grid also is a basis for developing data for benchmarking and analyses. So just a very quick walkthrough. We use the overall strategy for Global Victoria that we found that content on their site, the overall messaging, take on the world, make global possibilities a reality. So then we looked at the verticals that this type of an organization, looking at who they would have to market to, and we look at and again, Luke mentions this, the importers, the agents and distributors, retailers, consumers. We think about how the basic message that they need could align with the overall message. So you're looking at, for importers, for example, foods are safe, products are legitimate and certified. There's transparency and predictability. For consumers, at the other side, you're talking health and wellness, experiential, it's global foods, so on and so forth. Those are the messages they need to hear. Your visuals, your content might speak about their concerns, and then you apply the market tactics. Each audience segment might have overlapping tactics, but they could have unique tactics. Importers have trade shows, conventions, fairs, letters of introductions and sales. You've got your consumers have digital strategy, m-commerce, engagement, and messaging. You've got specific segments within those as well at the bottom. So it's just giving you an idea of the type of marketing that you have to undergo to really attract the type of attention you need to make a success in the American markets. Next slide, please. So then we're going to dive a little bit more deeply into m-commerce. Again, moving on all devices, mobile, away from just a desktop purchase. So in 2019, U.S. online retail food and beverage purchases increased 22%, making it a top growth category for online sales. In 2020, nearly 60% of the U.S. population shopped using mobile devices. That equates to about 168 million people. And increasingly, consumers are making purchases and payments using smart mobile devices. The results are that in 2020, 69% of U.S. customers paid for purchases using mobile devices. 30% of those consumers used a smartphone. This equates to an estimated $3.56 trillion in 2021 of mobile device purchases, an increase of 25% from 2020 and 2.5 times more than that generated in 2017, which was a mere 1.4 trillion. The numbers are expected to increase. By 2023, over 80 million will be making purchases using mobile devices. Over 1/3 of them, or 34%, will be using smartphones. So how are those shoppers using their smart devices? They're using mobile devices to shop and compare prices. Over 2/3, or 67% of shoppers, use mobile devices for digital window shopping. Over 3/4, or 77% of those shoppers, make a purchase online, making apps and websites vital to sales and revenue success. 3/4 use a mobile device to compare prices while in-store shopping, with 83% of those shoppers using a smart device app to access product pricing from your competitor. Half of the shoppers indicate their main smartphone activity is shopping using apps and websites, while 3% of those, which I expect to increase, of those rate online shopping as their main activity. Next slide, please. So the new tag is 2025 in 2025. To give an idea of the power of m-commerce in the food industry, we see online shopping as a percent of total grocery market increase from less than 3% in 2018 to over 10% of grocery market in 2020. By 2025, online food shopping is expected to contribute over 20% of the market, driving the point that marketing strategy must include a positive shopping experience both online and in store. Next slide, please. So consider that 60% of viewers use social media to research product, while 71% use it to make product recommendations. My colleagues will speak a little further to this, but to recap social media, a digital presence will engage consumers, build brand narrative for awareness and allegiance among consumers, buyers, and distributors, promote product features, attributes, consumer testimony, and even to build contests to engage consumers. Here in the US, we're seeing more and more organizations on their own company websites promoting their products with contests. And then, of course, ultimately produce sales on your producer site. So thank you for your attention. I'd like to now introduce you to John Sadowski of Metro Valley Advertising. John, it's all yours.
John, please unmute your microphone.
John was having a little technical difficulty a few minutes ago. Has that been corrected?
No, I'm going to work off my slides and I'll cue Annabelle to move us along. All right. So again, thank you all for joining us. So if there's a little bit clunky here, I apologize, but I think we're going to be able to move through this just fine. Again, my background is in advertising, particularly in media. I started by selling media in New York City in the New York market. So I've done all of the traditional media, print, radio, TV, and outdoor, before moving over to the agency side where I started specializing in digital media. One of the first lessons that I got out of all of that was that media is really inventory driven. Supply and demand is critical in terms of pricing, placement, and really everything that has to do with a successful media campaign. Many people can believe me when I say that television is supply and demand because you don't see that many commercials. But even banner advertising, where you think of billions and billions of opportunities that are available, still gets impacted by demand. So every year during the holidays, price of digital advertising in the US goes up. You have a major election, as we did 2 years ago, the price of digital advertising skyrocketed for about 2.5, 3 months. So it's something that we always have to be aware of. Next slide. Skip past that. Skip past my bio. And if we can move over to the media overview page. So we essentially view media in 2 buckets, digital and traditional. No surprise there. Digital is based on websites. Then you can order them however you want to, search, social, display, programmatic. If you're not familiar with the term programmatic, what it refers to is the buying and selling of digital media in real time, using real-time bidding and computer-generated programs. So think of it as the digital stock market for advertising. And streaming is anybody who watches television or radio over the internet as opposed to traditional manners. Television, radio, outdoor, and print are, our base traditional media. Disadvantages, obviously, for both. For traditional advertising, one of the great benefits is its cost per thousand. So to reach 1,000 TV viewers is relatively inexpensive compared to reaching, let's say, 1,000 people on social media. It makes it a great mass reach vehicle, and it's an excellent, traditional is excellent for building your brand. So letting the market understand who you are and the problem you solve and for whom. Digital advertising, much more personal. It's a one-to-one communication. Outstanding targetability. You can target by geography, demography, behaviors, and it's extremely measurable. Disadvantages, traditional lacks that targeting. And even though the CPMs are low, because you have to buy so many at a time, it still becomes very expensive. So kind of a little oxymoron there. It's also very hard to measure. Digital advertising is much more labor intensive. Because it's digital, it lowers the barrier to entry. More people are able to use it, and that means there's more competition. Next slide, please. So some of the trends that you should be aware of here in the US, and some of these trends have accelerated because of the pandemic, but weren't caused by the pandemic. The first example is probably the easiest one. Mobile usage is continuing to increase. Patricia alluded to that earlier. That was happening prior to the pandemic. What was interesting is even though people for the first few months, of the pandemic were in lockdown, spent all their time at home, obviously TV usage increased. Well, mobile usage increased faster. So I think that's a good example. The amount of streaming media, people who watch their television and radio and get it over the internet, that's been increasing. Digital media continues to grow, as she alluded to also. Another thing to be aware of is that the cookie is going away. If you're not familiar with what a cookie is, it's a piece of code that websites put on your browsers when you visit them. You may have had the experience of going to a website and then seeing advertising for that website seemingly follow you around as you surf the web. Those are enabled by cookies. They're going away, so it changes how we track. Video is really the #1 form of content. People get lazy. They don't like to read, but they love to watch videos. So if you're going to develop a media strategy, it's important to keep video in mind. Artificial intelligence continues to be more and more important every single day. It enables our programmatic advertising. It enables a lot of the targeting that we do, working behind the scenes to help figure out what the right and wrong ways to present advertising are. And finally, social media, sometimes in the US, you'll hear that it's not as important, people aren't using it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is still an extremely important media vehicle and still one that's used very, very successfully. Next slide. When we undertake a media plan, there is very much a process that we go through, and it's important for advertisers to think about this process before they get involved. So even though agencies will help you with this, you really should have done your homework before you get to the advertising stage. Then the first thing, in advertising is deciding what your objective is. What is it that you want the prospect to do? Are you looking for them to go online and actually make a purchase? Are you looking for them to go online and just watch a video so they understand who you are and what your product is all about? So have that in mind. Next, understand the prospect journey. How is it that people come to learn about your product? How is it that they engage with your product? And how is it that they buy your product? So what does that process look like? The next thing is the client avatar. Patricia was talking a little bit about the different market segments in the US. We'll cover that a little bit more in a minute. But the point is that there are many, many different ways to slice and dice an audience. And the more precisely you can do it, the more successful you will be. It's no longer good enough to be able to say, hey, we're looking for women between the ages of 25 and 54. Now we want to know exactly who that woman is. We want to be able to say that she's 38 years old. She has 2 children. The household income is $150,000, and she goes to the gym 3 times a week. It might sound a little bit overboard, but in fact, it really helps you hone in on where you need to place your advertising, and it gets things moving in the right direction far, far faster and saves an awful lot of time and money. Strategy. Strategy is the whole process of how we decide to create that awareness, the engagement, and then the conversion for your target audience. And tactics really then refer to the media we use to achieve awareness, engagement, and conversion. Next slide, please. So kind of dovetailing a little bit on the audiences available in the United States, and this is just a very top line introduction. But, you know, I even looked as far back as the silent generation. So one generation before what Patricia was talking about. But, you know, as she mentioned, these are huge numbers of people, you know, 70+ million baby boomers. So think about that in terms of its impact. You know, we have ethnicities that you may or may not need to address when you advertise in the States. The Hispanic audience in America tops 70 million people who identify as Hispanic. It's a huge number. Even the African American population at 41 million plus is an extremely lucrative segment of the market to reach. Demographics are kind of obvious: age, gender, income, geography. Geography is important to think about because of the size of the United States and because of market segmenting. A lot of times we take clients and start them with smaller geographies so that they can build some momentum and build some you know, forward velocity, as well as learning more about what works and what doesn't work. So many times you're better off thinking about smaller geographies. Don't conquer the whole place, the whole country at one time. Conquer smaller geographies and then work out. Finally, you know, behavioral characteristics. I addressed that a little bit earlier when we talked about a client avatar, but understanding some of the really nuanced behaviors of your audiences is very, very critical. Rick's going to talk about a case study of a client that we've worked on. You know, so import beer drinkers was very critical to them, but they're a beer company, so that's sort of an obvious one. But whether or not they're avid book readers, maybe not, but can very much impact the success of a campaign. Next slide. And the segments that you choose, and I just broke out the segments by age here, very much will impact the kinds of media that you'll use. Going after the oldest generation, it's purely traditional media. You won't have any success going after the silent generation with anything digital. Baby boomers, you'll still reach them more often with traditional media, but you will absolutely be able to hit them with search and social, and they'll be very good consumers of that media. At Gen X, we start to transition to a much more digital audience. Now we can reach them with broadcast, but we can also reach them with a lot of different streaming media. And when we hit millennials, we've tipped the other way. You're very strongly digital. You're using much less traditional. And for Gen Z, it's almost the reverse of the silent generation. I would use relatively little traditional and rely almost extremely or exclusively on streaming. So easy rule of thumb: as the audience gets younger, the reliance on mobile increases. So with that, I will pass it back to Pat.
Thanks, John. That was a great presentation, and I hope you're all seeing how it starts with Luke. We add some data. John's just built on that, and I'm turning it over to Rick Chrisberg. He is going to speak to you about communications, and then Rick and John will share a case study with you. So, Rick, I turn it to you.
Thank you. Having a little bit of a tech problem here because it's not advancing to the next slide, so I'm a little bit flying blind. It was doing fine until about 30 seconds ago, and all of a sudden my name popped up, and now all I see is the audience tactics slide. Annabelle, what slide are you on right now? If you could help me, kind of guide me a little bit.
Okay, the slide is the one with your picture on it, the A-team. It's just a brief, but do you want us to advance?
There we go.
You have it?
Now it just popped up. So hello, everyone. Like I said, my name is Rick Chrisberg. I am a partner, and I head up account services at the A-team, which is a creative engagement agency in New York City. I have spent my entire career actually working in New York City, working in the development and execution of promotion, experiential, digital, social programs. In my spare time, I'm an adjunct professor of marketing at one of the local business schools here in New York City. I find it a lot of fun teaching the next generation of marketers. But let's talk about marketing today. Next slide, please. And it's not. Okay. So, Patricia, if you could kind of guide me through, because unfortunately it's not going to the next slide on my screen. You're muted also.
This is the A-team slide. So I think you probably do you want to speak about it's your A-team slide. I'll just say that with the city behind it.
Okay, you just go to the next slide, please.
Okay.
So the next slide, is it a different approach?
It's your bio again. So you already spoke about this. So next slide, Annabelle. It's a different approach. That's your slide.
Okay, so again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about my agency. Again, we just take a little bit of a different approach on how we grow businesses. We have clients large and small, and like I said, we're all about coming up with creative solutions on helping you grow your brand. Next slide, Annabelle, please.
It's your 23-year history.
Okay, great. Again, our agency, we're a privately held agency in New York City. We've been around, we just celebrated our 23rd birthday. And again, we have a track record of growing both large brands and corporations as well as small brands as well. So just wanted to share with you some of the partners we've helped over the last 23 years. And if you go to the next slide, we wanted to share with you our experience working with brands here in the United States that have global parent companies. So the A-team understands how to market brands here in the United States. And you can see here, you have Paulaner Beer, which we'll share a case study with from Germany. Qingdao is a recent addition to our portfolio. It's a Chinese beer. Sobieski vodka from Poland, Voss water from Norway, et cetera. So like I said, we have a lot of experience working with brands that have global parents. Next slide, please. What slide is this one, Patricia?
This is what we do.
Okay, again, I'm not going to go through this in detail. You can kind of look at it on the back end, but just to share the capabilities of what my agency, the A-team, can bring to the party. Next slide, please.
It's the marketing in the United States slide.
Okay, so you can go to the next slide after that. It has the flag of the United States and Australia.
That's showing now, Rick.
Great. Again, this is something that's been mentioned previously. I just wanted to kind of share it. Look, international expansion is the natural step for brands looking to grow their business. However, I think the key thing here is that what works in one country may not work in another. So we recommend taking a cookie cutter approach. And look, we've talked about this, that the United States market is very different than the Australian market. Again, just a few numbers here just to show the United States is 21% larger in geography, but we have 307 million more people. So again, something that just reiterates what's been said previously. The United States is just a different place to do business in. Next slide, please. Is this the understanding your audience slide?
Yes.
Great. So it's not enough just to target consumers in the United States. You actually know specifically who you want your product to resonate with. So for example, my agency has clients that want to focus on expats living in the United States. But we also have global brands that want to target a more mainstream audience. And that's one of the case studies we're going to share with you today. So demographics plays a big part. Millennial and Gen Z shoppers, for example, they want to know that their purchases make a difference. They tend to spend their money on products that give back. So for some clients that we have, charitable promotions can be very effective. In addition to demographic differences, geographic preferences play a big part to marketing here in the United States. As someone who's lived in both the Southeast as well as the Northeast parts of the United States, I can tell you that the likes and the dislikes are very different. So it plays a key role in determining how you want to go to market here in the States, of the geography. Next slide, please. So this is the researchable slide.
Yes.
Thank you. U.S. consumers, especially younger consumers, tend to be very suspicious of brands. They really do their research before buying anything. That's why brands need to make it really easy to be found on online and social media. In addition, having a really strong understanding of shopper marketing is crucial. So knowing where your brands and prospective customers spend their time, both online and offline, and what they expect from a brand like yours, and how your brand can best appeal to their needs is crucial. Other tactics that my agency uses, like influencer marketing, John talked about videos, consumer promotions to drive awareness and showcase your brand, are key to building both brand loyalty and customer advocacy. Next slide, please. So about building a community, US consumers see a lot of branded content. So the key question is, how is yours going to grab their attention? Successful brands know that content alone won't bring in more customers. You need to create an engaging social community around your brand to get customers to pay attention. So while it's really important to talk about your brand and product, it's just as important to engage with consumers to talk about your brand and its key selling benefits. And again, social media, as John mentioned earlier, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Snapchat, it really depends upon what your brand is, who you're trying to reach, and what the objective is key to reaching those consumers. Next slide, please. Okay. Is this the polliner slide, Patricia?
It's the shopper marketing expertise.
It's the shopper marketing expertise. Okay. So again, I alluded to that earlier. Having shopper marketing is key. Again, the traditional purchase funnel of marketing is really no longer valid. Consumers are always shopping, whether they're shopping online, whether they're talking to people, whether it's word of mouth, whether they are on social media whether influencer marketing. We really need to know when and how to target people in the shopper marketing world. So key to that is not just knowing where they are, but also being able to bring the right tools to bear to be able to target those people via shopper marketing. Next slide, please.
This is the shopper marketing guiding principles.
Yeah, I think you could skip over that, please.
Okay. And then this is the page A-Team Metro Valley case study. Great.
So what we wanted to share with you is an example of a case study that actually John's company and my company worked on together. We share several clients. And we thought this was a really good example because Paulaner beer is a German imported beer. And we want to share with you how we were able to take a fully integrated program, combine it with media to have tremendous success. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Should be the picture of people enjoying their beer.
Yes.
Okay. So again, for Paulaner, we do a lot of different things for them. We develop brand platforms, advertising, media planning and buying, social media, digital marketing, shopper marketing, in-store merchandising, sweepstakes, etc. So again, there's a lot of different things we do. If you could go to the next slide, please. What we want to share with you is a program that this should be the follow the leader slide, Patricia.
No, now it is. Thanks, Annabelle.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what we want to do is share with you this program we developed called Follow the Leader. And during Oktoberfest, again, if you're a German beer, Oktoberfest is your big holiday. It's your Super Bowl. During Oktoberfest, Paulaner is the #1 selling beer at Munich's Oktoberfest. What we did was we challenged fans to follow the leader on Instagram. There they were engaged in an exciting way and tested their knowledge and enticed them with imagery of cold Paulaner leader steins. We supported the program with in-store merchandising at grocery stores, liquor stores, etc., social media, and ad media across multiple touch points. If you could go to the next slide, please. Is this the media strategy slide?
Yes, follow the leader media strategy.
Great. I'm going to let John take this slide, please.
Thanks, Rick. So I think one of the things to keep in mind is again, using the United States and size as something of perspective. You know, larger beer brands in the United States, the Budweiser family, the Coors family, all spend well north of $100 million a year in marketing in the States. Smaller brands like Corona is probably somewhere in that $50 to $75 million a year. We have a fraction of that. So it's very important to be strategic with how we go to market with our message, because we can't compete with those guys. So instead, it has to be far more niche focused. And so that's kind of what this plan was about. It was first and foremost working with Paul Anner to decide the markets that made the most sense for us to go in based on their sales, based on people who drink imported beers, and that's why I had that in my slide deck earlier, and other different parameters, so that we felt that we were going after the right markets. Second of all, as I'd also mentioned to you, sometimes geography is very important for us because you need to shrink it down. Buying the entire U.S. can be very, very expensive, and it might not be the smart way to go. The smarter way might be to be more concentrated instead of being a shotgun approach, more rifle focused into markets, and have enough of a media presence to really be able to move the needle. And that was the idea here. Our target audience is men 25 to 44 years old. We know that this group is tech savvy. It tends to be a little more affluent. So how do we go about reaching them? Well, one of the things we decided was we were going to stay with digital and really focus it on mobile. Sight, sound, and motion, which is the basis for television, is really just such a powerful way to get a message across. So we were able to, develop, really impactful messaging for sight, sound, and motion, as well as 60-second audio commercials, and then deliver those via digital platforms that were mostly going to be, consumed on the phone. So those streams were, video streams, so that TV commercial was showing up on people's phones. And when they listened to their favorite radio stations online, they were hearing our ads there, as well as some banner ads that we used, especially for people who had already clicked on our ads. And so it's something that every year drives more and more traffic to their Beer Finder, which is one of their online platforms to help people locate where to get the product. And sales in those markets have increased every year. So as the last line of this says, we will be kicking off our third year of advertising with Paul Anner next Wednesday, as a matter of fact.
Great. Next slide, please. I'm actually caught up now, Patricia. So we'll see if it goes to the next slide.
Good.
Well, I actually think I spoke too soon.
Oh, this is the Rolling Stone slide?
So
Rick, this is a slide that demonstrates some of the creative.
Yes. So if you actually click on the video, Annabelle, you can actually, it'll play the video without sound just to give you a sense of what's going on, because it's not working for me right now. But I think the key component of this is that our client has been able to take this media support and sell it into retailers. And with that sell into retailers, they've been able to drive incremental display activity. So if you go to the next slide, I believe there should be, just a sample of some of the display activity we've been able to generate. And, we started off doing this for one period a year. Now we're up to 3 different media periods a year. And because the client is seeing a tremendous return on advertising spend. And they're able to, again, leverage it not just with consumers, but they're also, again, here in the United States, we have a 3-tier distribution system. So you have the manufacturer, you have the importer, you have the distributor before it actually gets to the retailer. So we're able to take this media support, leverage it with all the channels, and the result is more incremental display activity leading to consumer takeaway. Is that the last slide, Patricia?
This is, follow the leader. It's with the display. It looks like the retail display.
Right, and that's, as I said, that was the example I was sharing with you, just
Okay.
and being able to get retail display activity by leveraging media support and really strong creative. Sorry,
Excellent.
this is a little bit strange, guys. Like I said, I'm having some significant technical problems right now.
I'm so sorry. Well, thank you. Actually, it showed up for me just fine, and it all worked well, and it was fascinating. Thank you both. Great. I guess the next slide, Annabelle. So I have just a few bullets of some opportunities and challenges you might find in the marketplace here. Some of them Luke mentioned, and then what I will do is ask Luke and John and Rick to give their insights and any other conclusions they might have. So just a few opportunities you'll find in the U.S. market. We've got consumer lifestyle changes and demographic changes. We've got consumer micro segments. You take what John and Rick were explaining, and then think about what Luke has already experienced, thinking about how your product will, understanding the demographics of the American consumer, and thinking how your product fits into those lifestyles and those demographics, you might be able to create a real opportunity for yourself. But understanding those lifestyle changes, the micro segments, and consumer experience and engagement all offer you an opportunity. If your product has unique product characteristics, as Luke mentioned, again, it's a great opportunity for you to come to the U.S. market, the North American market, and launch a product. Product and package innovation, digital promotion and sales, all of that can contribute to real success. It offers a real opportunity here. Things are shifting in the marketplace, so having something very innovative will percolate to the top. Some of the challenges: we are hyper competition. We are a crowded and fragmented product market. As Luke mentioned, we've got much more complexity, much more competition. There are barriers to digital trade and electronic commerce. It is expensive. Everything's multiplied. You need marketing support to enter here. And then the online fulfillment and sales fees were also mentioned. Colleagues, what would you add as insights and conclusions for the audience? Anything other you can think of? Unmute.
Sorry about that. So just two things. One, just want to reiterate something I said earlier, that what marketing that works in other parts of the world may not resonate with the U.S. consumer. Traditionally, global campaigns have had mixed success in the States. We always recommend developing creative which supports the core of the brand, but modify it to work in the U.S. market. And the other thing I just wanted to bring up is that something that's a huge trend here in the United States is the growth of private label. Most grocery retailers have focused their energies on the creation of high quality, lower cost private label items. And as you can imagine, it adds an additional complication, because you now need to get the attention of the buyer at a retailer when they have, in essence, a competing product.
Thanks. And last week's presentation spoke about the private label, so it's great that you brought that up. Thanks so much. John, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just think that, again, really planning your strategy is imperative. When you get into the media world here, as Patricia was saying, everything is multiplied, costs are multiplied. So you really want to have done your research, understood who it is you're going to target, how you're going to get them to buy your product, so that you don't come here and just say, hey, I've got X, I've got Y, love me, because it won't happen.
So true. Thanks. And Luke, anything more you want to add? I borrowed some of yours already, but anything more?
No, that's okay. The one thing I didn't really mention is it's been talked about the regionality of the United States, and it is very different. It is quite fragmented, but that can also be an opportunity. So don't be afraid to start small. Don't be afraid to target a single area. It might be the Midwest, it might be South Texas, it might be New England in the Northeast, it could be Florida, it could be one state. I mean, Texas alone is comparable in population to Australia. So it's okay to start small. You may be a big hit in one area, and you may be an awful failure in another area, but you can still grow your business dramatically just in that one area. In my opinion, you're better off starting in one region, one demographic, one whatever, and if that works, grow from there. It's almost a recipe for failure unless you've just found that next big thing to just hit the United States head first and just try and go as big as you can, as quick as you can. I don't think that's going to work. So don't be afraid to really target. I know the guys mentioned this as well with the kind of rifle focus. Don't be afraid from a geographic and regional perspective as well, or a retailer perspective or a distributor perspective. Don't be afraid to be quite specific and deliberate and targeted with that, because it might actually work out better for you in the long term.
Thanks. So
If I can add to that real quick, Patricia, I would take that even a step further and suggest that unless you have really good research and reason for starting in a major market, do not start in New York or Los Angeles or Chicago unless you have a really good reason, because they're going to be the most expensive markets as well, with the most competition. So, you know, Lucas said it, you know, don't be afraid of being regional. Don't be afraid of starting smaller.
Thanks. And that was something else last week. We mentioned start small, grow big. Thanks so much. So we have a question here. So for an Australian small or mid-sized enterprise with a new retail food or beverage product, what marketing budget would be needed? Not including travel to trade shows, but any guide for that? John, you're mute, or Rick, any ideas what a budget might be?
You know, Patricia, that's a challenging one, and one we get asked all the time, and it comes with so many variables that it makes it very, very challenging. You know, for going back to why I talked about the process of, you know, how people get to know you, who your target audience is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It starts becoming something where I'm just throwing darts at a board. I realize that people want to have a feel for that. Sometimes it's better to be able to actually say, hey, you know, this is my product, this is who I'm targeting, and kind of work backwards, if you will, from that.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'll just jump in if I can.
Yes.
Just very quickly. I can't the marketing yet. Look, that John said, you're throwing a dartboard, but from our perspective as manufacturers, which I mean, it's not technically a marketing spend, but in terms of slotting fees and that kind of thing, you're looking at, to get into a reasonable grocer, you're looking at $10,000 per SKU, $10,000 to $20,000. So they are going to ask you to pay $10,000 to $20,000 for a single product to sit on their shelf. So if you have 6 products, you're going to be looking at $60,000 to $120,000. That's in ambience. This is American, not Australian dollars, obviously. Frozen, I've heard numbers up to $100,000 per SKU. So that's it's not technically marketing, but it's for all intents and purposes, it's part of the basic package, right? And free fill can work similarly in that they're going to want a case of each product. So across all their stores, potentially, generally it's either a slotting fee or a free fill. So if you have 6 SKUs, again, that's 6 cartons in each store. They have 150 stores. You're looking at I'm just using 6 SKUs as a number. You can do the maths. You're looking at 900 free SKUs. So you need to pay upfront upfront for the manufacturing of that product to get into that store for free. And then you need to make sure you have enough stock on hand to fulfill any future orders. So again, they're not strictly marketing, but it's part of that upfront establishment. So I hope that helps.
I'll also just to build on that also. So it's one of the reasons that we always say also to start small, is because you want to have a track record of success. So yes, you're going to invest the money in slotting fees to get into a specific retailer, and you're going to have the product there. But if you don't successfully pull that product through, at the end of the day, you're going to be wasting a lot of money. You're going to get delisted out of that store. So having a track record of success here in the States on a smaller level, figuring out what works, what doesn't work on a smaller level will benefit you long-term in the end.
Excellent. Thank you. Here's another question for Luke, but I'd like to chime in with this too. But Luke, you take it first. With not being able to travel to trade shows and research the market in person over recent years, what advice do you have for an SME with limited budget to enter the US?
The first thing I'd say is that one of the good things that has come out of COVID and the travel restrictions is that you can actually attend a lot of these shows virtually now. So a lot of the shows do have virtual exhibitions and matchmaking and that kind of thing. So if you feel that it would be really, really advantageous to attend, you can virtually. It's probably not the same. I've been to a couple in person and a couple virtually, and the experience is better in person, in my opinion. But you do have that option. As far as the other alternative, it's going to be tough. With a limited budget, it's going to be tough because you have to do both components. You have to make the product and you have to sell the product. And again, obviously you need to do that in Australia, but it's so much bigger here that you really need to make sure you've got that money behind you. There are easy fulfillment options here. Now, I don't know your specific situation. If you're manufacturing your product, exporting it, co-packing it over here, but there is a very straightforward, well, it's not very straightforward, but there is a fairly simple process of putting your product in a fulfillment center, getting an account set up on Amazon, and just putting a few $1,000s a month, or even a few $100. You can go as low as $10 a day in terms of marketing on Amazon. You're going to get great results from it, but it's a start. You can do that. You can put your product into a fulfillment center, set up 3PL, and they will deliver product for you from the orders that are done through Amazon. That would probably be the easiest, cheapest, simplest way to get the product here and get some market feedback on the product in terms of reviews, and also in terms of what keywords are resonating with your customers and what's really hitting home and what product is selling really well. Because you may find that you've got 6 SKUs, I keep coming back to 6 SKUs, you may find only 2 are shooting the lights out, but over here, 2 might be enough for you to build a pretty reasonable sized business, particularly if you're on the smaller size. You could be doubling your business just with 2 products over in the United States. So I would say the best thing to do if you've really limited and can't do much would be finding a fulfillment center over here, a 3PL fulfillment center, getting something set up on Amazon. And this is assuming it's not temperature controlled either. Otherwise, it's just not an option. But if it's ambient, doing that and then just sending via Amazon or e-commerce if you can do that too. And I'm happy to, if my contacts are available, I'm not sure, I'm happy to provide assistance after the presentation too on that.
So I would just like to add, it's the research of the market. We've conduct research for organizations who don't have a presence here, but they have asked us to conduct the market research, whether it is the secondary research, similar to what we've done for Global Victoria. We do competitive analyses so that if you tell us this is our market, identify the competitors, identify their strategies, their pricing. We do that. If you want to have feedback from consumers before you get here, we have sent actually product to consumers nationwide and then followed up with an online survey. So they test the product in-home. It's an in-home user test. They test the product. They then complete the survey, tell us what they think about it, what they like, how do their level of the packaging, the flavors. So we conduct a lot of that market research, competitive product. You just want to know if your tagline works, if the colors of your product are appealing. We can do that, and you don't have to come here. We have the resources to research the market from here, and then you can go the other routes that Luke had mentioned, but to just get an idea of what the market thinks of your product or who your competitors are or where a niche might be for your product, we can take care of that before you even leave Australia. Anything else? Any other questions? I don't see anything here. So I guess that's it. I want to thank all the speakers. I was jazzed by this presentation and learned things, and I've been in marketing for all my career. Those of you who are viewing, you know more about the U.S. market now and the people and information to help you succeed. We're happy you joined us. And I'm going to turn it over to Nigel Warren of Global Victoria. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Patricia. And that was unbelievable. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name's Nigel Warren. I'm the Victorian Commissioner based here in San Francisco and work alongside Brian. I've been working in and out of the US market for 25 years, and that was one of the best presentations. I feel like we need to replay it probably 4 or 5 times to get the real value out of it. But some of the things that jumped out to me, and I'll be really brief. I mean, 15% of the market that's imported is just of one of size and scale. Luke, I really think you made such a good point about when you said you need a reason to be here. Be really clear, and the messaging and understanding the consumer, your consumer, was just jumped out at me. Patricia, the change across the board in the market and the scale, and you mentioned about opportunity and competition all at the same time and the importance of being focused, and the massive change around digital impact on purchasing really jumped out at me. John, the insight, the breakdown of how to get to different generations was incredible. The power of video, the importance of artificial intelligence, and I'm really happy to know that the cookie's going away. Although earlier this morning I still accepted a cookie, so hopefully it's going to be quicker rather than slower. And then Rick, on the brand side, I think that importance of understanding your audience. Really interesting what you said about younger consumers being suspicious of brands, the importance of geography. And I've been back here in San Francisco 4 or 5 months, and as the father of 2 sons, the point you made about younger consumers really caring about what your company stands for and really where the products come from, it was such a good point. But that real importance also that you raised around building a community, the loyalty, the advocacy, really important. And having run a business here before, that the point that you jumped out at me about reusing media and your content in different environments, really important one. And Luke, I think you kind of you brought it home at the end there. I totally agree with you. This market, if you can win a spot, a space, and build from there, it's a really good strategy. You can be super busy in the US market, churn through a whole bunch of cash, and then you don't meet your quarterly sales target. So that really resonated with me. Look, I'll just finish in saying the US for us here in the market's a critical market when it comes to food and beverage, and you succeeding here is really important for us. We're going to be building our trade team, adding some more trade managers under the great leadership of Brian. And you can count on us. You should use us as a resource. We're here for you to work directly, but also to work with the great partners that you saw today and heard from today. And we're looking forward to supporting your growth as you look at the US market. I'll probably leave it there. I'm really looking forward. This series is phenomenal. Global Victoria is really committed to providing the best sort of insight and information we can, from a distance. We're opening back up. Flights are starting again. People are moving. But this sort of information is just absolutely invaluable. So thanks again for the session today. I'm already looking forward to the next one in the calendar of the series, and wish everyone a good morning in Melbourne, and for those in the US, a good afternoon here. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks very much, guys.
Bye.